It can be really confusing when you're following somebody like me on YouTube and then you hear from somebody else who's doing sync licensing a piece of conflicting or contradictory advice. And then you're stuck there thinking, who do I follow? Which one is the actual truth, or which one's actually going to get me to the place that I want to get to? This came from a comment that I got from one of you guys, and I really do appreciate this question because when I started my YouTube channel 4 years ago, did a search online to see, well, is there already a lot of people kind of talking about how to do well in sync licensing? Maybe I don't really need to do this. Maybe there's just already some great resources out there. I just hadn't really looked. And what I found about 4 years ago was a couple of people were talking about it, but I couldn't really find anybody that was actually in the business doing it full time and actually in the trenches on a day-to-day basis. A lot of people maybe they dedicated a couple of videos on their channel to it because they had interviewed somebody who was doing it, or they themselves read a couple of articles or a blog, or they watched the video about it. But I didn't really see too many people out there that were just, yeah, this is what I do every single day. I wake up, I create tracks, I throw them out to a library, I get my royalties, and this is how I sort of make my income. I really didn't see that out there. So I saw kind of a big hole in the marketplace for somebody like myself to come in and give you guys just a first person perspective on really what it's like to succeed in this business. Alongside of that, though, I have to teach you what I know, right? And I have to teach you the things that worked for me. It would be very unwise and just not cool of me to teach a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't do and that I didn't follow, but then tell all of you that it's going to work out great and it's fine, it's totally going to be awesome. That would be a very unethical move because I didn't do those things and I didn't follow that path, so I can't really vouch for things that I don't teach, right? Should be kind of obvious, but that's why everything that I teach is really kind of focused on, of course, my personal journey, what's really worked for me, and obviously teaching you guys a lot of mistakes that I made, because a lot of these mistakes do not have to be made by you. You can really sort of jump through the first couple of years of this business much sooner and pay your dues much quicker if you know some of the pitfalls to avoid. In terms of, there is a lot of people now, I think it just feels like in the last couple of years, a lot more people are starting to get online and talk about this space, talk about sync licensing and teach it, offer courses, all that kind of stuff. The first thing that I would tell you guys to do is, obviously, I'm not the monopoly of how to succeed in this business. There are probably 1,001 different paths to do well in this industry. And even those students that are under my wing, that are following my advice, you guys are all going to have a very different path in this business than I did even. And of course, there's just no such thing as repeating the same path as somebody else. So it's going to be very unique for you. First of all, it's just a different time period. When I got started, the industry looked very different. It was a completely different world out there. And you just have a completely different sort of set of obstacles and opportunities, right? It's not all negative. There are definitely new opportunities now that I'm very envious of, that I wish I had gotten started and saw this opportunity. But it's just different than it was when I got started. So you guys are going to have your own individual journeys. But what I would say is, for anybody else that is teaching this stuff, the first sniff test that I would definitely look for in terms of, like, if they're giving advice and you're like, well, should I follow that advice or should I not? Or should I follow them in general? The first thing that I want to look for, if I'm going to go study under somebody or follow, how to do something from a teacher or from a guide or anything like that, a mentor, is I want to know that they've done the thing that they're saying that they're teaching, right? Because there's a lot of people that aren't producers, that aren't composers, that aren't actually doing what we do here in this business, and also living through the struggle of what we go through in this business. If you haven't noticed, on my YouTube channel, I've dedicated a very large portion of my videos not to technical knowledge, not to how to compose a track, not to how to mix or master, not how to do this or that, but actually the psychological pressures that this business puts on you, and the feeling of hopelessness and the feeling of wanting to give up, and fear of rejection and being bummed out when you don't get a gig. Like, these are all psychological issues. And why am I spending so much time on my channel? And now, obviously, with the Sync Psych series within Sync Academy, why am I going in that direction? If you guys have been in this business for at least a year or two, you know that that's pretty much the most important part. The technical knowledge and the understanding of how to get your music into libraries and all that kind of stuff, that's actually the easy stuff. That stuff is pretty easy to understand, pretty easy to gobble up and to comprehend. it's much harder to figure out a way to keep yourself motivated for years, year after year, quarter after quarter, when you're not seeing the results quickly, right? This is about delayed gratification. This is about knowing that you're basically planting the seeds, and you know that you have to wait until the next year to harvest them, right? Or even longer sometimes. So how do you get through the first couple of years and not really having complete evidence that it's all going to work out for you, right? Because you see a little bit of growth, you see a little bit of royalties, you see a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but it still isn't enough a lot of the times for you to feel completely confident that you made the right choice by sticking with this industry. That's what I dealt with. Royalty check after royalty check, constantly doubting myself, constantly not really sure, and then always repeatedly having to make that choice over and over again to put my head down, keep working. Now that was a lot harder for me because I didn't have a community. If you're trying to do that by yourself, best of luck to you. It is why I, a few times even had to reach out and talk to some of the other composers on the library I was working with and just vent with them and say, is this really working out? And, is it working out for you? And just, how tough it is. But it felt so good to just finally kind of release that kind of frustration, or at least share it with somebody else to know oh, I'm not the only one who's kind of feeling crazy here and feeling like I might be just going nuts. So having a community like we've built with Sync Academy is so much more powerful for you than doing this by yourself. It's going to be such an outlet and such a release for you, okay? But if you're getting advice or insights from somebody and they're not working in the business as a composer, I think that's actually a really important thing, because there are people that are library heads, there's people that are publishers, or they're mixing engineers, or whatever they are, but they're not doing the work. They're not doing what we do here, which is cranking out music, busting our butts, getting up every day, figuring out a way to stay motivated, using those reference tracks, doing the work, basically. We're in a war here, essentially. If they're not doing that and they're handing out advice and insights and guidance, just take it for what it is. It might not be bad advice. I'm not saying it's all garbage. It might be really great advice. But if it's coming from somebody who doesn't really get it, like they don't get the struggle, like they're not really in this industry doing the work that we're doing, who knows where they're getting that advice from, right? I don't know, because all I can tell you guys is everything that I tell you comes from my brain, comes from my experience, comes from my emails, comes from everything that's really actually happened in my career. So I want to really pride myself on giving you guys just the straight, raw truth, which is why, I think some people, when they come to my channel, get a little bit bummed out. They might get excited about sync licensing, but I'm always kind of harping on this, but it's not for all of you guys. And it's really, really hard to get, successful, and it takes a long time, and you will get rejected. I'm not saying you may or may not. You 100% will deal with rejection. You will feel like you wasted your time. These are all things that will happen in your career, and that sometimes scares people off, and they're like, well, screw that. I just wanted the quick buck. I wanted the sort of, lotto ticket plan to get myself into something a little bit more profitable with my music. And that's not my thing. That's not what sync licensing is. It's not even what this industry is about at all. And I like doing that, though. I like being just 100% raw and honest with you guys to let you know that's what this takes, because I don't want to have emails from those of you that thought this was going to be a walk in the park in 6 months and say, Jesse, what? I have to wait a year or more to even see royalties? I didn't know that. I thought you could just, earn your money right off the bat. If I'm not preparing you guys for really what you're getting involved with, then I'm not a teacher. I'm not really doing that. And so if people aren't giving you that raw truth, that raw honesty of how it actually feels to be in this business, and they're not being very, very direct with you, and they're maybe sometimes hyping you up more on the sort of, yeah, but you can make so much money, and then you can get so much exposure, and this and that. Those things are all true. I don't want to discount the fact that there is a lot of great opportunity and money and exposure to be had in this business. That's all true. But if that's kind of all you're hearing from some people, and they're not giving you the sort of, yeah, but it's also work, and it's also dedication, and it's also perseverance, and it's also a commitment to yourself, and it's also dealing with rejection, and it's also a lot of very challenging, seemingly negative, they're not negative, but very challenging emotions that you have to go through to get to the point where this is doing full-time income for you. If they're not giving you at least the yang to the yin, they're not giving you the other half of the story, then I would definitely keep one eyebrow up and be a little bit more suspicious about what they're teaching. because they might just want to be selling you something and getting you really hyped up on something. And I hope you guys don't think that I'm trying to do that to you. I really hope that you guys see that I'm really trying to just prepare you as best I possibly can to make sure that if you're going to be one of these crazy ones that wants to jump into this business and really go for it, you have all the preparation that you could possibly get. You have all the armor, you have all the tools, you have all the weapons, you have all the insights, you have all the knowledge. And obviously, most importantly, you have a community that you can really connect with when you're feeling that demotivation, that depression, and that anxiety of what the hell am I doing in this business? So for what it's worth, I hope that sheds some light on maybe how to, determine whether or not you should be listening to my advice or somebody else's advice. The last part that I'll end on this is that, like, you basically just need to follow somebody that you groove with. Like when I'm looking for somebody that I want to learn from, if I can't stand their personality or I don't like the way they talk, or I don't know, there's something about them rubs me the wrong way, I'm not going to want to listen to them for hours and hours and hours. And like, spoiler alert, if you guys do join Sync Academy, you're going to hear a lot of me talking and yapping. A lot of our tutorials are obviously taught by me, but we have other Sync Academy pros as well. But it's a lot of me in there. So if I rub you the wrong way, if I'm just kind of annoying to you, if you just don't like the way my personality presents itself, then don't follow me, right? Don't sign up, don't get closer to what I'm kind of doing here, because obviously you're just gonna get more and more pissed off or mad or whatever it is, right? So I think a personality check is also a really, really good thing to do, that if you just like the person who's giving you the advice, you dig them, and obviously you feel like they have the credibility because they're doing the work, then go for it. And if it contradicts what I teach, who cares? I just have my point of view from my path that really worked well for me, and they might have a completely different path that worked well for them. And if you just kind of really vibe a little bit more with them and their personality and their teaching method, they're your guru, they're your teacher, they're the one that you should really be following and getting their advice, okay? And don't worry so much about the fact that, well, Jesse says this and you say that, and I think that, don't worry so much about that. Just remember, if you zoom out a little bit, you can say, well, Jesse had a different approach. He had a different journey. He had a different experience. So he's teaching what works for him. This producer or composer is teaching what worked for them. And both could be true. And so there's really no conflict there at all. In fact, what I think you should be doing is taking both of those bits of advice and going like, okay, well, now I know that there's two different kind of philosophies and approaches to whatever part of the industry you're talking about. And maybe I'll work with one or both, or maybe I'll now be able to just be aware that there's a choice here. So if anything, getting more perspectives can be very beneficial for you, as long as those perspectives are coming from a credible source, from somebody who's actually doing this work, actually in this business. So, all right, before I go on and repeat myself 1,000 more times, I will end this video. I appreciate you guys, your thoughts and concerns and questions. If you have any more comments or ideas or anything about this topic, please leave them below. I'd love to read them.